4,000 years ago, in the mountains of northern China, a city rose that shouldn't have existed yet. Stone walls stretching for miles, a population larger than most cities of its era. And beneath its foundations, mass graves, filled almost entirely with men. For decades, archaeologists knew people had been sacrificed here. What they didn't know was why the victims were almost never women. This week, a 13-year genetic study finally answered that question and revealed something about how this civilization saw its own people that no artifact ever could. Shimao was built roughly 4,200 years ago in what's now Shanxi Province, China, centuries before the first Egyptian pyramids were even planned. It covered about 4 square kilometers, enclosed by massive stone walls, and was organized into distinct zones: a palace area, residential districts, and ritual spaces. This wasn't a primitive settlement. Shimao had planned urban zones, sophisticated stonework, and evidence of long-distance trade, jade objects, and cultural influences connecting it to regions hundreds of miles away. It was, by any measure, one of the most advanced societies on Earth at the time. And it had a dark practice built into its foundations. Archaeologists excavating the site found multiple mass burial pits, piles of human skulls and remains deliberately placed, consistent with ritual sacrifice tied to construction and ceremonial events.
Here's what stood out immediately. Even before modern genetic tools existed, the mass burial victims were overwhelmingly male. In a culture with plenty of evidence of women in daily and ceremonial life, the sacrificial pits told a strikingly different story. For years, this was simply an observation, without an explanation. Was it about status? Captives from war? Some ritual requirement tied specifically to gender? Bones alone couldn't answer who these men were, where they came from, or why they, specifically, had been chosen. That required a different kind of evidence entirely. Not what was visible in the bones, but what was encoded inside them. Led by Professor Qiomei Fu at the Chinese Academy of Sciences, a research team spent over 13 years extracting and sequencing ancient DNA from 169 individuals connected to Shimao, one of the largest ancient genome studies ever conducted on a single Chinese archaeological site.
The genetic results revealed 2 things at once. First, Shimao's general population was mainly descended from local Yellow River farming communities, but carried genetic traces connecting them to populations far to the south and out on the steppe, evidence of surprisingly extensive contact and movement across prehistoric China. Second, and this is where it gets specific to the sacrifice question, the team was able to trace family relationships and social structure directly from the genomes. The results confirmed Shimao operated as a strongly patrilineal society, where lineage and status passed through men. And critically, the genetic data confirmed that the mass sacrificial burials were composed almost entirely of male individuals, while also showing these men were generally not closely related to the elite lineages buried in high-status tombs nearby. In other words, sacrifice appears to have been reserved specifically for men positioned outside the ruling bloodline, not random victims and not close family of the elite. That's the genuinely new part. Earlier theories couldn't distinguish between these are war captives, these are lower status locals, or these are outsiders. The DNA shows something more specific. Gender and lineage together determined who was protected and who wasn't.
This doesn't fully answer every question. Researchers still don't know the exact ritual justification or precisely how these men were selected day to day, but it fundamentally changes the picture. This wasn't chaotic or random violence. It was a structured system built into the social hierarchy itself, where lineage determined who held power and who could be sacrificed to maintain it. It's also a reminder of how much modern genetics is quietly rewriting ancient history. 13 years of DNA work just answered a question stone walls and pottery shards couldn't, sitting unresolved for decades of excavation. Shimao's walls stood for centuries before the city was abandoned, its purpose and its practices eventually forgotten. It took 4,000 years and a genome sequencer to finally ask the bones the right question. If you want us to cover the next ancient mystery science just solved, drop it in the comments.